Morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather, and happy Thursday to you. Today is the day we are going to see some chaos with Hurricane Helene strengthening quickly and taking aim at Florida's Big Bend tonight. But it doesn't stop there with that landfall. This storm is growing in size and is set to become a once-in-a-generation hurricane with tremendous amounts of storm surge, incredible amounts of rain, probably some tornadoes, and inland penetration of potentially hurricane force winds all the way up into North Georgia, maybe even into the mountains here of the Carolinas, with some extreme wind that you just don't typically get when storms hit in this part of the country. We are predicting a Category 4 landfall here this evening, sometime between 8 and 10 o'clock in the Big Bend region. And an area that's been hit already with 2 hurricanes in the last 13 months. This one will be stronger and bigger than the ones that have already hit. The tropics don't stop with Helene. I am going to talk about some other systems to keep an eye on. We do have a new tropical storm in the North Atlantic, no threat to land. That may be our next hurricane. That's Isaac. The one after it has a chance of becoming Tropical Storm Joyce, and there will be more threats coming down the line here next week that I will talk a little bit about. But let's mainly focus on Helene for this video. We now have, I'm going to update this, a Category 2 hurricane. Winds are up to 100 miles per hour now as of the latest advisory at 8 Eastern. And the storm will be a Category 3 this afternoon. You don't see it on here, but expected to be a Category 4 before it makes landfall this evening. It may get there by about 5 o'clock or so tonight. We'll have to see, of course. And a large area under a hurricane warning from just down the coast from Panama City, right here through Cape San Blas, through Apalachicola, through the entire Appalachia Bay, all the way down the coast to just north of the Tampa Bay region under that hurricane warning. Most of Florida under a tropical storm watch. Warning. We have hurricane watches as well for the Tampa Bay area. And that tropical storm watch extends all the way up to basically Calabash, North Carolina. And it doesn't stop with the coast here. We'll take a look at the advisory map here, and you can see we are projecting this storm to still be a hurricane overnight tonight. It will be weakening at that point as it penetrates southern parts of Georgia. That hurricane warning is in effect all the way up to about Macon, to near Columbus and Phoenix City, to far southeast Alabama, to the eastern Florida Panhandle, the Big Bend region that includes Tallahassee, all the way into portions of North Florida, getting close to places like Lake City. I don't have the exact locations on the map here, but you'll see just a huge area under a hurricane warning that expands over 125 to 150 miles inland as this storm is going to be moving quickly and booking it, and it will not have as much time to weaken as a traditional hurricane may. We have tropical storm warnings for western Cuba. Those will get lifted later on today. The Florida Keys are getting tropical storm conditions as we speak, 40-mile-per-hour winds being measured in the Key West region. The entire east coast of Florida has a tropical storm warning. That includes Orlando, Lakeland, and all of the peninsula here, Jacksonville area, most of Georgia. That's not in the hurricane warning, is in a tropical storm warning. And I've never seen a storm that's had a tropical storm warning or greater for the entire states of Georgia and South Carolina. If you're in the western panhandle, you are missing this. You're on the good side of the storm. There'll still be rough surf and a little bit of rain here, places like Destin and Pensacola, but fortunately you are avoiding this particular storm. Western North Carolina, including Charlotte, is under a tropical storm warning as those stronger winds will arrive here towards early in the day tomorrow on Friday, and they will make their way up into the mountains as well. Storm surge is expected to be probably the highest that we've seen in the eastern Big Bend region, the Nature Coast here, 15 to 20 feet from Carabel to the Suwannee River. Now, a lot of that's due to the size of this storm and where it's funneling that water. As you see and you note here on this particular map, the coast bends away, and that allows water to actually pile in and funnel in a little bit more than you would see with a part of a coast that sticks out. It makes it more vulnerable. So places like Keaton Beach down to Cedar Key have the chance of being completely inundated. Imagine your house is maybe 12 feet high. This will go perhaps a lot higher than your house level if you're on the beach there. It's not a highly populated area, but those that are on the coast are going to see major peak storm surge here. That will start this evening. I think the worst of that storm surge will be as the storm is making landfall between 8 o'clock and about midnight. It'll gradually subside as the storm races inland tonight after midnight. You'll still see storm surge across the rest of the West Coast. This could cause problems across all of Tampa Bay. It could cause problems in Panama City, Mexico Beach, but the area of greatest concern is the Big Bend. So that is a look at storm surge. Wind speeds are picking up today as this storm races north-northeastward. We'll have tropical storm conditions moving into the Tampa Bay region here later this morning, and then moving into the Panhandle and into the Big Bend area after lunch, and then advancing all the way into Georgia this evening. That includes eastern Alabama as well. In the Atlanta area, we'll see those tropical storm force winds or possibly greater, depending on the exact track, moving in around midnight or just after. That will also include upstate South Carolina, and then southeast Tennessee, the Smokies, the Blue Ridge will have strong winds overnight tonight and first thing tomorrow morning. We'll even see potentially tropical storm force winds on the East Coast here today, especially northeastern Florida, Fernandina Beach, Daytona, all the way up to St. Simon's Island, Brunswick, into the low country of South Carolina towards this evening, and then maybe even up to close to Myrtle Beach during the late evening and overnight hours tonight. Here's a look at the tropics, and we're going to talk about everything. Helene, obviously the biggest storm on the map. You don't see it, but now we have Hurricane John again, part 2, off the Mexican Riviera. We have a new tropical storm. It's not very big, but it's out there. This got a name. The one that hit North Carolina, South Carolina last Monday did not. Don't ask me about that, but this is Isaac. This, I think, will be Joyce here by tomorrow night or Saturday. Here's a wave that we do need to keep an eye on. After Helene leaves, it's going to be in a spot where I think there may be some development, but it's going to be probably at least a week for that to happen. And then there's another wave coming off of Africa that, after this system moves out, may have a chance to develop somewhere in here. So the next names on the list are Kirk and Leslie after poor Isaac moves out of here. All right, closer look here. You see John, you see Helene. The two are far enough spaced apart to not interact with each other. If anything, the moisture from John is actually getting fed up from Central America into the Western Caribbean. This is also making it a wetter storm than typical. You've got this feed from both the Pacific and from the Caribbean side in an area of record warm water. Obviously a very bad situation when it comes to rain totals. The water vapor image looks a little different than yesterday. We do see, obviously, the eastern side of this storm is bigger than the western. There is some dry air here that did get into the system. You can kind of see still a little bit of dry air left, but our storm is beginning to fight back and overtake that dry air. It's in an optimal area here to grow and become a moisture storm. As a result, it is a high-end Category 2. You can see on our infrared satellite, we do have an eye beginning to poke out and clear out. There were actually measurements from aircraft earlier that showed concentric eye walls, which typically is not a sign of strengthening. The two actually compete with each other, but it looks like we are going to see one eye wall taking over here pretty soon, and that sets the structure for a rapid intensification event. Here you can see that outer eye wall. West of the dry Tortugas, we do have some tornado warnings across the interior portions of South Florida. We may continue to see some both on the East Coast and the West Coast as the day wears on. Here's aircraft data, and it's very clear now that hurricane force winds are expanding across all this area, basically in purple aloft. And we can see the pressure has been falling steadily. It's in the mid to low 960s, which is a strong Category 2 at this time. Hurricane force winds are being measured from different aircraft here, but generally speaking, about 100 miles per hour, a little bit higher at flight level. You can see the pressure drop here. This was measured about an hour and a half ago as of this video. The pressure continues to drop here. You can see the newest Recon obs showing that pressure dropping steadily, at least a millibar per hour, which would be significant because we still have more than 10 to 12 hours before this comes in. You can also see on here that the eye wall here is taking over with stronger winds. Here's the concentric eye wall. You see winds here. These are Category 1 to Category 2. These are Category 2 to almost Category 3 strength. The expectation is that this storm is going to grow and we're going to have an inner core that is just one particular eye wall. But again, these are very difficult to forecast. You can see here, this is the observation that got us to Category 2 here a little while ago, and a very big growing storm system at this point. So that's the Recon data. That is the truth that shows you what the estimated winds are. Now, the ship's model is already too weak with the storm. It'll be higher than a 2. But you can see I'm using it as an illustration to point out that the wind shear stays low until the system makes it close to the coast tonight. At that point, it may not be enough to weaken the system. It could weaken it slightly, but either way, it's not going to be much of a factor here. Sea surface temperatures very warm over the next 12 hours. They come down a bit, but still warm enough. Probably not enough to slow down our intensification. The amount of moisture for the next 12 hours is significant. Then it comes down, but you have landfall. Heat content also pretty significant as this storm is in a sweet spot here to strengthen pretty quickly. You can see the water temperatures here. Our storm is moving right through the warmest part of the Gulf into this area. Even as it hits cooler waters up in here, it may start to weaken a little bit at the very end, but probably not much. You can see the ocean heat content also echoes that. Our models have shifted a little bit to the right here. Wakulla, Taylor counties are kind of right in that bullseye, but there can still be some shifting in both directions. I can safely say at this point, I don't think this is going to make a direct hit on Tampa Bay. I know people have been asking about that because of what happened with storms like Charlie and Ian. However, you're still going to be in the right side of this and be dealing with some nasty weather. The models from earlier today were a little west of that consensus line. Wakulla County, I believe Gulf County, and I think Franklin. And I don't want to forget Jefferson, even though there's not much coastline there. So a little farther west, putting Tallahassee in a potentially really bad spot. Even Atlanta, potentially in a really bad spot if this comes right over just west of you. And eventually it'll weaken as it moves into Tennessee. What's left of it gets sheared to the east here. We got remnant moisture early next week, but not a tropical system by the time it gets to the mid-Atlantic and the Ohio Valley. Now, the intensity forecast on this is junk. The reason why is we are at this point here, and our intensity is already right about here. So the strengthening that we have all expected is occurring, so the models will play catch-up, but we're likely heading into this direction here. High 3 or 4, very, very small chance of Category 5. I think that's going to be a bit of a stretch, but we did see that with Michael, so we just can't totally rule it out. But I've been saying 4 for a while, and I like to stick to my forecast. There's no reason to think that it can't strengthen another 30 miles per hour between now and tonight, the way that it's building and growing. Here's a look at our tropical model showing that this system will have dry air, trying to get in on the back side of it here tonight, but it may be a little bit too late. This pressure, 944, that indicates a strong Category 3 or 4 storm. It's going to be kind of on the borderline. We've seen models before that were going a lot lower than that. They have since corrected. Here's the HWRF model showing that we'll have steady intensification right up through about 8 o'clock tonight. This particular storm has landfall around 10 or 11. It's a little bit behind some of the other models, but you can see it doesn't really weaken until that landfall point occurs. And this actually would be Jefferson and I believe Taylor counties right on the line there, putting Perry, Florida on the absolute worst part of it. But you can see inland, it isn't going to just fall apart right away. It's racing and accelerating. The models I showed you before had this system going near and west of Atlanta. The tropical models continue to be to the right of that, bringing the strongest winds up towards Milledgeville, towards Greensboro, Georgia, maybe Athens, all the way over to the Augusta region. These are hurricane force winds at times. As the storm continues, it's going to race all the way up into the upstate of South Carolina overnight, into western North Carolina. And because of the higher elevations here, once we get into the Blue Ridge as well as the Smokies, winds are going to be a lot higher up at that level due to what's going on with the jet stream. So hurricane force wind gusts are going to be measured, I think, when we get into the higher elevations. The NAM shows a very strong storm. I don't think it's as strong as what the NAM shows, but you can see the size on the satellite here is massive. Landfall being pushed back a little bit to about 10 or 11 o'clock Eastern tonight, but then the storm accelerates, the eye closes up, but still keeps a pretty decent core as it races off to the north-northeast. Worst case scenario winds from the NAM. I'll show you worst case, but you could see tropical storm force winds expanding onto the peninsula this morning and then moving up towards the Big Bend around dinner time or just a little bit after that. Inland, we're going to see wind gusts potentially going over 100 miles per hour near the eye wall. The eye wall can hold on as it gets all the way up to near Valdosta and perhaps close to or just east of Macon. Statesboro might get in on this. We'll have to see. And then Augusta is potentially in that as well. But you can see wind gusts well to the east of the center, which is going to be about here, are getting up into that 70 or 75 mile per hour range. Even in this area, the low country, northeast Florida up towards portions of lower South Carolina, have the potential to see wind gusts getting close to that hurricane intensity, which means we're likely going to see some power outages well away from the center of this storm. Southeast Florida, you are actually not going to get a whole lot of strong wind out of this. It'll be breezy today. There is a threat for a few tornadoes, but you're kind of missing out on the meat of the storm. And if you're in western Florida here, once we get west of Panama City, for the most part, it'll be windy, but a relatively drier day, as most of the heavy rain stays into this area. When we get back to Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, this will not be your storm. It'll actually be pretty nice. That drier air will move in and cool things down a little bit here today. Here's a look at our wind speeds as the storm penetrates further inland. This is 5 a.m. tomorrow. And we do have the potential for strong tropical storm force winds moving into the Midlands and the CSRA, moving into the upstate area here of South Carolina. You could see wind gusts around 80 miles per hour around the Lake Hartwell area. We could see wind gusts in Asheville and especially in the higher ground here west of Asheville, getting up close to hurricane intensity early in the day tomorrow. See how quickly this is moving? This means our storm just isn't weakening very quickly. It is racing northward. So we may have potentially some very strong wind in the mountains here by the first part of tomorrow. Even the Charlotte area, Hickory, Rutherfordton, Lincolnton, Shelby, those areas, Crowder Mountain, all have the potential to see wind gusts beyond 60 miles per hour, maybe even up to 70 or higher. And I think these winds are probably overdone across the eastern part of Kentucky and lower West Virginia, unless you're in some higher elevations. Remember, this is the NAM. It's probably too strong. But I would be preparing just in case for heavy rain and power outages across portions of Kentucky, East Tennessee, especially around La Follette, Jacksboro, those areas, Southwest Virginia, and even sneaking up into West Virginia. We could have some scattered power outages as well. It's been pretty wet, not so much in West Virginia, but across this area. When you add on top of that strong rain and wind, the power outage chances go up exponentially. Here's a look at our wind speeds in the mountains and in the Charlotte area. And I don't think Raleigh's dealing with strong winds. It'll be breezy tomorrow morning, but our issues are going to be south and west of the Triad, and especially sneaking over to Metro Charlotte. And this could be catastrophic for some in the mountains. We could see some tremendous amounts of rain and wind, with wind gusts perhaps approaching 93 miles per hour here in the Smokies and 80 miles per hour across the Blue Ridge. Again, this is just one model, but it shows kind of a worst case scenario if this storm really does do what it could. But on top of that, I think this is going to be a catastrophic inland flood. Very heavy rain where the storm comes inland in Florida for sure, but it's moving quickly. The problem that we're dealing with today is that it's already very wet. We have a strong flow out of the south, bringing very wet weather, some flooding into the southern Appalachians. And you tack that on with a well-developed storm moving inland, the rain continues to climb and climb. Some of these areas have had catastrophic floods from tropical systems before. Even though this storm is moving fast, it's going to be a couple days of very heavy rain. We're going to be talking about feet of rain and likely, not trying to put the fear of God in people, but likely a multi-billion-dollar disaster in the Carolinas as well, especially western North Carolina, but maybe upstate South Carolina and, of course, North Georgia. So a very high risk of flooding, even inland that gets up into Virginia and West Virginia later today and tonight. Here's an idea of how much rain is being projected from now through Sunday. Significant amounts in Florida, but this storm is rolling through quickly, so maybe 8 or 9 inches. I think your bigger problems are going to be wind and surge related. But when we get inland here, it's already wet today before the storm. We have a preview. You can see these amounts are as high as 17 inches in western North Carolina. This is not a model. This is the official forecast. We see extreme amounts here as well from Atlanta on north and east. So a big-time rainmaker and some welcome rain, although it will be heavy for parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, and the lower Ohio Valley here. Zooming in on the Carolinas, because this is where our biggest problems will happen. We've got mountains in play. Moisture going up the mountains creates heavier rain rates, especially when it comes out of the southeast. And I do think we're going to see mudslides. I think we're going to see cities washed away in the valleys here. If you're near water, and just something that I think you just need to be praying about. And obviously, if you're in this area now, your local officials are responding to this. They've been talking about it for a while. They've been briefed on it, but don't take a chance with this kind of rain. Those of us in North Carolina may remember Hurricane Matthew in 2016. While it didn't hit Western North Carolina, it really put a damper on Eastern North Carolina. I've seen the damage firsthand. That was a storm that brought 8 to 10 inches of rain to a non-mountainous area. But it was wet in September leading up to that storm, Matthew, in October. Even though they played that NC State Notre Dame game in it, despite the lightning delay at halftime, those that were just south and east of Raleigh had tremendous amounts of river flooding to the point where towns were underwater for a couple of weeks. Now we add mountains to that and things just get worse. So again, not trying to scare people, but you guys need to know what's coming. And unfortunately, that's what we're looking at. So here's a look at our rainfall across Tennessee, northern Alabama, generally speaking, 2 to 4 inches, locally up to 6. A heavy soaking rain, but not a major flood at this point. And this moisture does spread northward indirectly from Helene. A lot of it's just going to be the jet stream and the upper low to the west. And we could see heavy rain across parts of western Virginia, You can see that the Blue Ridge is highlighted here with up to 5 inches of rain. The Shenandoah Valley will see a couple of inches. You do need that rain, and parts of eastern West Virginia all the way up into south central PA are going to get a little bit of rain as well. Tornadoes are going to be a threat here today in Florida, and then especially tonight from Jacksonville up the coast. You can see that a lot of these are nighttime. They will be potentially dangerous because they're difficult to see and they're quickly spinning up. So just keep in mind, we do have a tornado watch for Florida today. I expect we'll see them into Georgia and South Carolina tonight, especially after midnight. And tomorrow, that threat shifts northward. Outside of the heavy rain, outside of the wind, we have bands of showers and storms that'll rotate inland from the coast. And these could produce a few tornadoes in places like Myrtle Beach, Fayetteville, Raleigh, Durham, Cary, all the way to Greenville, Wilson, even to the coast, including the Outer Banks, including the beaches. You can see that on the NAM model today. There's a threat for a few tornadoes, but the chance actually climbs after midnight, after landfall. Near the eye wall here, yes, but more so across eastern Georgia, and then spreading overnight early tomorrow morning into the low country of Georgia and South Carolina. Farther north and east, you'll see that here as well. Chances start to climb after midnight in Georgia, then after 3 a.m. in South Carolina. And then there may be a bit of a lull, but still a few tornadoes possible here, even close to the coast, early in the day tomorrow. But we're still going to potentially see a few tornadoes in the Raleigh area, Fayetteville, Wilson, Rocky Mount, Greenville, possibly even closer to the coast here around late morning tomorrow and continuing into eastern North Carolina, especially for the afternoon, and maybe even getting up into southern Virginia later in the afternoon, although I think by then things are going to start quieting down. Here's a look at the rest of the tropics. Real quick, you see our features here, wave here. This should be a depression later today. Probably eventually it'll be Joyce. And this area we should watch a little bit later as well. Neither of those looks to be a threat to land at this point. Here's a look at our invest here. Should be a depression soon. It's still kind of broad, but it's getting there. But it's not a threat to land. It'll be recurving to the northeast and could become a hurricane, but this could be a little bit too aggressive as well. Here is Isaac. Poor Isaac is being overlooked, as it should. It looks pretty healthy. It's not a big storm, but it is strengthening here, feeding on some pretty good energy aloft, and expected to be a hurricane by tomorrow night or Saturday morning, and then fizzle as it moves eastward. Could bring heavy rain to the Azores and eventually Western Europe. Ignore this purple line. Something got messed up there. But yeah, possible hurricane briefly here early in the weekend, then weakening after that. But we're not going to be done, unfortunately, after Isaac. You can see here potential Joyce could be around through the weekend and then lifts away next week towards the Azores. Possibly something behind it that we need to keep an eye on. There's actually going to be a better chance for something to develop beyond it. And I don't want you to get too caught up in this, but something we do need to keep an eye on here towards the end of the weekend, and in particular next week, we may see something try to spin up again in the Western Caribbean. The GFS has been on it here, but it's not the only model. This particular run takes it up into the Tampa Bay area as a hurricane. Again, that is more than a week away, so we don't trust it a lot. But we see that there's been consistency that something could form again in this area. I've talked about it for a little while. This area is going to stay active. So believe it or not, it's not going to be just Helene and then we're done for the year. There could be another one. And the timeline on this is still kind of uncertain, but I don't think we would see it before this time next week. I think it would be more likely next weekend on into the following week. So you can see the GFS corrects from the central Gulf Coast to South Florida and kind of in between here. The windshield wiper effect, as you guys could see. The Canadian model, by the way, doesn't have a hurricane hitting Florida, but it does have something in the southern Gulf next weekend. And the European AI, same thing, spins something up gradually at the end of next week near the Yucatan, and then this does get it pulled more to the north and east. So a little too soon to make any calls. This is a lot slower, by the way. The GFS has Florida being threatened as soon as later next weekend. The European doesn't have Florida getting threatened until later in the following week, 2 weeks from today, essentially. So lots of time's going to come between now and then. Don't get freaked out about it, but don't forget about it either. So I'll be tracking that for you. We have Hurricane John expected to be at least a Category 2. And that is going to fortunately be well up the coast from Acapulco, but you can see there's a lot of moisture here in Acapulco. This is round 2. So John hit down in here 2 days ago, moved inland, fell apart. Part of it got back over water, and here we go. It's strengthened again into a hurricane. A very bad situation. I don't want to forget about southern Mexico, but you can see this storm is strengthening significantly, and eye is getting ready to pop out right in here. And you can see that's going to kind of parallel the coast and eventually make some landfall here in less than a day. And this is an area where storms this time of the year can rapidly intensify pretty significantly. It's distanced enough from Helene to do that. It's in a spot where it can definitely do that. The official forecast is Category 2 with landfall. I know that says landfall is expected here in the morning tomorrow. So we have about 24 hours, and then what's left of it goes west and weakens. And you can see here our models are showing rapid intensification, several up to Category 2 and 3 strength. But it's already here. So it's, again, performing more than what the models are predicting. That is nothing to be overlooked at this point. Heavy rain expected here. This is on top of several feet of rain that have fallen. We could see several feet more. So keep those folks in your prayers. I'm tracking those storms, even though Helene is the main focus today. I'll be back here this evening, but I appreciate your time today. As always, like the video, and please be respectful of others. And let's just all continue to pray for the safety of everybody in the path of this storm. I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We serve a wonderful God, despite what we see here with these natural disasters, things that we just have no control of. But I will say this, the Lord did make us a promise after he flooded the earth. Genesis 8:21 says, the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. We'll have disasters. We have evil here, but the Lord has made that promise, that covenant, that he will never destroy the earth again. However, the laws of nature do take over here, and those who live near the beaches and in flood areas and in wildfire areas are very much aware of this. Because of the evil that is out there, there are some things we just cannot prevent. All we can really do is pray and take care of each other and love one another the way that our Lord has through his Son, Jesus Christ, who died for our sins. We're forgiven if we accept that and become Christian followers. We are promised eternal life. And it's a tough world out there, but eternity is worth it. That's what I wanted to share with you today. I am praying for everybody in the path of the storm, and you're welcome to request any prayers from me. I will spend time in prayer for you. I hope you all have a great day. Catch up with you later on. See ya.